Today I'm going to be sharing how I self-studied for the A-levels and the tips and tricks that have helped me get 3 A stars. This video is going to be helpful for anyone who's self-studying or looking to self-study a qualification, someone who can't keep up with the school schedule, or someone who wants to get ahead of the school schedule. So keep watching to learn more. Hi, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Wesley and I'm in my final year of high school. I've recently finished self-studying the international A-levels for chemistry, biology and maths, and receiving an A star for each subject. So if you guys can't tell, I'm actually not from the UK and I also didn't study at an international school. I learned about the A-levels from some friends and some information online. Then more than a year ago, a couple of friends and I just decided that sitting the A-levels would be a better qualification than our local one. There were a couple of options open on how we could approach the whole thing, but in the end we opted for self-studying. And we started studying during the summer of Form 4, so right after year 11, and it took us about a year to finish studying everything, and we sat the exams in October 2022. So even if you're not studying for the A-levels, I'll be sharing everything I've learned from self-studying and how you could use these tricks to get better results in whatever exam coming up while tailoring to your own schedule. So tip number 1 is to know your syllabus. The most important part of your preparation is to know exactly what you're preparing for. If you're looking for treasure, then you're going to need a map of exactly where you're going. Likewise with studying, especially self-studying, you have to know your final destination. Since there are no teachers and no schedule to guide you, then it's even more important to know what you have to cover and exactly what is the end goal. For the A-levels, each exam board will have a specific set of subject specifications. Please print that out and use it to keep track of the content, as it offers a really clear list of content and detailed topics that you have to cover, and these will definitely be examined and maybe some specific skills and formulae that you have to know as well. For any other qualification, try to find a set of exam guides or specifications. If these aren't available, then you're better off following the content page of designated textbooks rather than unofficial information online. Trust me when I say I'm speaking from experience. Now tip 2 is to know your tools. The first thing I did after checking the specifications was run down to the bookstore and grabbed all the textbooks that I needed and a calculator that I also thought I needed. Now in hindsight, that wasn't the smartest thing to do, because I ended up never actually using the lab book. The Edexcel International A-Level practical exams are actually paper-based exams. So they were written tests, and that lab book wasn't actually a textbook, but it was more of a workbook of sorts. I'll explain how I studied for those units later on. And I also made a mistake with the calculator. So the calculator I bought was a Casio FX991ES Plus, which was recommended online. But before that, I had a fully functional Casio FX50FH for my local syllabus. Now if you look at the calculator guidelines for the A-levels, they don't actually specify which models you can use and which you can't. So I only realized that the FX50FH was allowed after I purchased the 991ES Plus and subsequently the CG50. Funny thing is, the 991ES isn't ideal as well, because it doesn't have sufficient pre-installed statistic functions and was actually quite slow. So unlike the 991EX, when I was doing the statistics unit, I had to keep going back and forth to the percentage points table just to look at the data. Now earlier I mentioned not to trust unofficial online study guides, but that doesn't mean that you can't reference them. There are many study resources out there, and the one that I used most often was called physicsandmathstutor.com, but that was only in the early stages. Just so you know, don't start printing out all the notes from the website, because specifications update every now and then, and these notes turned out to be slightly inaccurate at times and missing bits and pieces. But what you can do is, after going through all the chapters in the textbook, cross-check with the resources that you found online and see if there are any extra useful information that might come up in application questions. And since sometimes the A-level marking scheme might not fully follow the textbook, it's always good to have a little bit extra information just so you can catch whatever curveball they throw at you. Now tip 3 is to not study word for word. One of the reasons why I abandoned my local curriculum for the A-levels was because I hated how we had to memorize long paragraphs to get all the answers, as if it were the only way to study. With A-levels, things are actually much more flexible. If you look at the textbook here, it's actually pretty thick, and it also has really thin pages. Now initially, my study buddies and I would just gather around the table and start reading every single word inside that textbook. But we didn't always get much progress done, even though we spent the whole afternoon reading it. Then COVID hit and we were forced to study at home ourselves, and There's something about studying alone that makes you lose a bit of motivation. It needed some getting used to, and I had a good think about how I should restructure not my studying, because I haven't even learned the content yet, but my learning. Instead of reading word by word, I begin skimming through the content and noting down key points, as well as discovering the magic of annotation. When you study, I want you to think not like an English setter, but an exam setter. Notice the keywords and the definitions that are more likely to appear in the questions or maybe even the answers, or key sentences and phrases that bring out an important point. Make remarks to summarize things in a way that it's easier for you to understand and remark those along the margins. Or you could even jot down points that you found online within the same spaces, just so it's easier to understand the content than going through all those poorly worded paragraphs. Personally, I don't recommend making notes for every single topic because I just think that it wastes a lot of time and it's not as effective as just making remarks along the margins and referencing the textbook content along the way. If you're having trouble understanding concepts, especially science topics, then try to draw simple diagrams that make connecting the dots between points easier, or maybe even between different topics easier to understand. It doesn't have to be pretty because once you clear your concepts, then it's very unlikely that you're going to ever need them again. But if it helps, you can just write them down alongside your remarks in the margins so that it's easier to know where that content lies. Now, if there's one thing that you're going to remember from this video, I want it to be this tip, which is tip number 4, make good use of past papers. If the learning method that I just mentioned to you doesn't make sense, then you'll understand after I talk about my study method right now. Most A-level exam boards, and I'm sure it's the same with other qualifications as well, have their past papers or even some practice papers publicly available for students online. And some online websites also have by-topic exam papers. They just collect questions from the past papers and separate them into different topics. These by-topic papers are some of the most important resources ever. So after learning the content, I would just go through everything again just to make sure that I have all the general knowledge I need. And then I would start looking for some by-topic questions to consolidate the knowledge that I have just learned in the past topic. At this point, I'm not really caring about the answer structure or any exam skills. I'm not even caring about what marks I get in these papers. What I'm looking to do is to make sure that I've got the correct information and have cleared all my concepts in that topic through these questions. The beauty of this is that it's okay to make mistakes. If you get something wrong, then look at the marking scheme first. See what points are you missing. Are those points actually included in your textbook? Or is it something that you've forgotten? Or maybe you haven't used the keywords quite well. Then note down your mistakes and then cross-check that information from the marking scheme with the textbook content and study that section. This way you save time from studying things that you already know and find your weak points while making sure that the knowledge sticks with you and that you know how to apply them into question scenarios. So IAL is actually done in units, and for science subjects like chemistry, biology and maths, there are 6 units per subject and each unit has individual topics. You could study everything and then move on to by-year past papers, or do what I did and finish on topics in one unit and then do a few by-year papers right away. Earlier I said that while learning the content, I highlighted keywords that I believe would appear in the exams. This is now useful because as you complete the questions, not only are you actively recalling these keywords and further embedding them into your brain, but while marking your own papers and learning from the analyzation process, you'll see that at least for Edexcel, the marking scheme comes in point form with the keywords in bold. These points are what the exam markers are looking for. So you don't necessarily have to write in long paragraphs in your answers, but you can do them in point form just as long as you hit those points. Please cross-check the keywords that you find in the marking scheme with those that you've highlighted and remarked in your textbook so that you don't miss any points that might possibly come up in your exam. Now, if you've done a few by-year past papers, you'll see that some question types appear almost every single year. And so the only set of notes that I've made was a collection of repeating question types and their answer keys, especially those that I keep getting wrong now and then. With time cost in mind, these notes are actually cost effective because they're really easy to make. You're just copy and pasting everything you find on your digital past papers and your digital marking scheme, so it doesn't actually use up a lot of time. The good thing about these notes is that you can look at the notes while covering the answers, and again, notice the pattern here. You're using active recalling to try to answer these questions mentally. And this saves time from just writing long answers, but also it's really effective to help you memorize the content. If you do by-year past papers after studying each individual unit, then be sure to save some papers for later. I recommend doing the older ones first, and space out the remaining papers evenly to do later. Say you finished Unit 1 and now you're moving on to Unit 2. After you finish studying Unit 2, you're going to do some Unit 2 papers at the same time. Slide in 1 or 2 Unit 1 papers. You might have heard of this technique, and it's called spaced repetition. So after a period of time, this is almost like a reminder for your brain, and it's scientifically proven to boost the long-term memory of that topic. Remember to save the newest papers to do right before the exam as final exam practice, because those will be the most updated ones and the most similar to the paper that you will be doing. I blocked out 3 or 4 years of papers to do just a month before the exam, and did on average 4 papers daily, including the marking and analysis from 7 AM to 7 PM in sort of a marathon. But that's just me, so just save what you think is an appropriate amount of papers to do right before the exam. If you want more details on planning your revision schedule or some past paper planning, then let me know in the comments. Back to the point I made before about IAL practical units. What I did was I found the steps and the videos for the required practicals online, and then just directly moved into the papers. Because the most important part of these papers is to know when to apply which procedure, and the answers are pretty repetitive and standard. So instead of reading the lab book over and over again, I would say just spend more time on other units, and use online resources to learn the procedures and apply them to past questions. I know there's a lot of information in this video, so I'll leave links to official A-level and international A-level specifications, past papers, and whatever online resources I've mentioned in the description box down below. And that's basically most of the tips and skills that I've learned from self-studying the A-levels. These worked for me, and I hope they'll help you along your study journey as well. If you're interested in knowing how I study for each subject, or you have any thoughts, comments, or questions, then put them in the comment box down below. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!